Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We're back here on YouTube and this is a follow-up video with 5 more common mistakes that you're gonna see in the Surfski and the Kayak. Last week's video was pretty popular, so we're gonna go over 5 more common mistakes that I see a lot. There were some that I wanted to talk about last time that might not have been the most common one. One of the big allures of the kayak in general in traversing through the water is having the option of 2 blades as opposed to a single blade of a canoe. This is both a benefit, but it can also lead to a major mistake. Having 2 blades presents the urgency to turn over very quickly. And there is a level of patience that we need to build within our stroke. With a canoe paddle, you only have 1 blade. So there's a built-in mechanism of taking the blade out of the water, going through the stroke in reverse in the air and setting up the stroke again. With 2 blades, when 1 blade leaves the water, the other blade is very close to the water. Its ability to grab water at any time is present. Again, with a canoe paddle, this blade has to go all the way back to the front. It gives me time to set up my body, just as you see here. But with a kayak paddle, when this blade leaves the water, this paddle can touch the water almost instantaneously. Problem with exiting and going to the water too quickly means that we are not setting up the stroke. We're not setting up our leverages, we're not setting up the paddle's leverages, and we're not setting ourselves up for success with the stroke. If you do not set up these variables, your stroke is terrible and it's not worth taking. Having the patience to set up all these leverages now gives you the opportunity to power a competent stroke. So the mistake is the moment that the blade leaves the water, using your new bottom hand to travel towards the water is the mistake. When we take strokes, we want this new bottom hand to stay in one spot and to allow the top hand to pivot around. This means that my top hand reaches its maximal height throughout the stroke before I make contact with the water. This way, when I begin engaging with the water, all of my leverages are set up and I'm able to push down on the water immediately within the stroke. If my bottom hand also travels towards the water, I exit and this bottom hand comes down, you can see that I'm gonna make contact with the water before I set up any of my leverages. I'm in a much poorer position here than I am giving myself the time here. So doing it incorrectly would be this top hand comes up, this bottom hand comes down, and I do this little pivot motion to go right to the water each time. And you can see I quickly enter the water, but I'm not setting up my leverages to maximize the stroke that I'm taking. What we're looking for is as I reach the exit, the new bottom hand here stays in place until my top hand comes all the way up, and then I travel down. I pivot, set up, take the stroke. Pivot, set up, take the stroke. And doing this fast is just a matter of muscle memory and taking the time to do it properly. You can still achieve a very high stroke rate by doing this. This is the phenomenon of watching sprinters and saying, man, it looks like they pause between each stroke. They're not consciously stopping, they're taking the time to set up all their leverages. Having that built-in patience is simply allowing this top hand to reach its maximal height before the blade makes contact with the water. So the next common mistake is the top hand traveling upward as you are completing any phase of the stroke. This compounds with the last error. Most intermediate paddlers understand that their top hand needs to reach a certain height up and travel down throughout the stroke. The problem now is if I exit and I reach the water too quickly, this top hand is nowhere near the height that I want during the stroke. But I identify that I want my hand at about eye level. So now as I'm going through the catch and power phase, my top hand rises up throughout the stroke. Once the blade reaches a neutral angle, the amount of force you find on the blade is much less. And then the top hand will drive down at the end of the stroke. Pushing up for the catch and power, and then pushing down at the negative angle is the error. We want downward pressure. We need to push down on the water and create these leverages on the water. Having the top hand travel up only moves the paddle and the blade away from the water. I cannot utilize the leverages of my paddle and the water below me if my hand travels up. So if my blade is making contact with the water and this top hand comes up, the amount of force that I have on this is very limited. In contrast, having this top hand at an ideal height and pushing down on the water throughout the entire stroke gives you much more of a leverage advantage than pushing upward. So admittedly, this may be the most common mistake. When we are taking paddle strokes in the kayak and in the canoe, we are looking to find pressure and create leverages with our hands on the paddle. How we power our hands is what a lot of technique is devoted to. If I can use my legs, my hips, my abdomen, my shoulders, my elbow, and all of these joints to power up, to power this hand, it is much stronger. But I can get the same leverage by bending at the elbow. What happens is we have one joint powering the hand, but as we go through the stroke, if you put the blade right on the top of the water and you yank with your bottom elbow, you will find pressure and you will propel your boat forward. Good technique is not powering it with the elbow, but powering it with the entirety of the body coming through like so. Arm paddling is the most basic way to find pressure and leverage with your paddle on the water. So what happens is as paddlers bend with their elbow, they find pressure, they propel the boat forward, and they're getting a supreme amount of pressure here on the hand. The problem is it's very limited. These muscles, even if they're overdeveloped, cannot process lactic acid like your quadricep and your glutes and your hamstrings and your abdomen wall and your lats and your anterior deltoid and your rear deltoids. You have all of these muscle groups that are working together to mitigate the fatigue that's going to build up in your forearm and biceps. So this next tip goes hand in hand with the bottom elbow bending too soon within the stroke. When we are using a wing blade specifically, it is designed to travel on this diagonal axis. It allows us to maximize our movement with our body, and it allows the blade to still be functional traveling away from the vessel. A flat blade, like a canoe paddle, operates better when it is being pulled by the side of the boat, and many paddlers will use a wing blade in the same way. Bending at the elbow is going to pull that blade closer to the hull, but the blade's design will fight you throughout that stroke. Its ability to release cleanly behind you is also very limited. You will scoop water at the back. Keeping the blade too close to the hull is one of the most common mistakes. With a wing blade specifically, it is going to travel away from the vessel. And tip that also goes along with that is not burying the entirety of the blade. You have two blades and you're sitting inside of a boat, meaning the water is very close to you. Sitting in your Surfski, when you let your arms rest to the side, you should be able to put your hands deep into the water. So when we add a paddle that has all of this distance between our pinky and the tip of the blade, the ability to put the entirety of the blade in the water should be very easy. It's very common to only see paddlers putting half or 3/4 of the blade into the water. When we take a stroke, it is engaging with a match of tug of war with the water. There is a great amount of resistance that you're going to find on this paddle blade, especially the faster you go. All of these leverages with your body and with the paddle allows you to potentially win this tug of war. Not burying the blade is a sign that you are losing the tug of war. Your body instinctually knows, I can't put this whole thing in the water because I can't progress through the stroke in a comfortable or manageable way. So less and less of the blade going into the water allows you to go through this motion easier. We have a full video on power potentials, paddle blade sizes, and lengthening it based on your overall skill level. So just like last week's theme on very quick tips that morph your movement into terrible patterns. Don't let the blade pass your body is one of the most simple terms that people will understand and try to create within their stroke. Again, with all coaches, they're trying to convey a point. we want to spend more time in the front part of the stroke than we do in the back part of the stroke. So this is a very simple way to try and fix this problem. The problem with this is the act of taking the blade out of the water takes time and length in the water. To truly get the blade to remove itself from the water in its entirety before it passes your hip means that you need to start braking at this elbow and ending the stroke in front of you. Even as I demonstrated there, my blade passes my hip. A better cue for this is stop pulling once the blade passes your hip, meaning that you're done with trying to power the stroke and propel the boat forward. All of that occurs in front of you, and once the blade reaches next to you, initiating the exit. Literal sense, what this means is as you get to the end here and you exit the stroke, the blade is going to end up behind you. Every single paddler on earth, when you look at them going fast, their blade is behind them. There are 0 paddlers that have the blade exiting in front of their hips. And the reason for this is from a mechanical standpoint, it's almost impossible. The moment the blade tip touches the water, you have to do some freaky morphology to try to make that work. Even here, if I had a blade attached to this paddle, it would be behind me. And that's me trying my hardest to keep this paddle in front of me. Nobody paddles like this. We all go through the motion in a diagonal way, the blade gets next to us, and it leaves behind us. Don't take some of these tips so literally because it will rob you of the thing moving the boat. Having a competent catch and power phase, this moves the boat. If you're somewhere starting a power phase and thinking about exiting, you are depriving yourself of the thing that is moving the boat at all. Excellent, so that's the 5 tips. Thank you guys so much for checking out the video. If you need more in-depth knowledge on surf ski paddling, check out the K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com today. We break down the body into the top arm, the bottom arm, using the hips, the legs, and how to drive with your heel, as well as breaking down the stroke into the setup, the catch, the power, and the exit, and putting all of these ideas together based on different skill levels in our foundational series for beginners, the developmental series for intermediate paddlers, and the mastery series for our fastest paddlers. As you make progress, some of the ideas start to change along the way. A simple tip on day 1 may not be applicable when you're on year 10. The K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com is outlined to help you progress no matter what your skill level is. Check it out today. Thank you all so much for checking out the series and supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe today if you have not. And a final shout out to our YouTube members, and the names will appear right now. Thank you all again. We'll see you next week for our next paddle tip video.